Hey everybody, Drilling in the Name of here, and we are back! And I do mean we, because I'm doing something a little different today. For today's video, I'm going to be giving over the keys to my good friend Lesnothis so he can give all you scouts out there an in-depth tutorial on how to use the cryo minelets for your Zhukovs. So don't mind me, I am just going to kick back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, Lesnothis here today to guest host a cryo minelets tutorial on Drilling in the Name of's channel. I think that cryo minelets are really fun and yet seem to be underutilized, and I also think that they're one of the best crowd control options for the scout, which is really helpful because crowd control is one of the scout's biggest weaknesses. The fundamental reason why I love cryo minelets is that they naturally complement a kiting playstyle, which is a playstyle that the scout class is inherently well suited for, so cryo minelets build on the scout's strengths in kiting while also shoring up the scout's weaknesses in crowd control. In this video, I'm first going to go over some options for a cryo minelets loadout, next I'll show cryo minelets uses against some specific enemies, then we'll look at applications for crowd control and kiting in general, and last but certainly not least, stick around for the finale where we'll put it all together against a really big swarm. Now I'm not a pro gamer by any means, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this in the comments as well. So without any further ado, let's get to the weapon terminal and talk about cryo minelets. Alright, let's take a look at the overclock. So with this overclock, bullets that hit the ground will create a cryo minelet, which detonates after a 4-second delay and applies 10 cold to enemies within a 1.5 meter radius. The penalties for this are -1 to direct damage and -10 to combined clip size, which are really honestly not that bad. And then with update 34, this overclock actually got even better. First, it got an indirect buff because the Zhukov's base spread was reduced slightly, and then it also got a direct buff by increasing the chance of each bullet producing a cryo minelet from 70% to 100%. And that increased minelet chance is a really big deal because it makes this overclock more consistent and also allows you to freeze larger targets. But what actually is a cryo minelet? The game doesn't really explain the physics behind these, but the best analogy I've come up with, at least for the visual effect, is that cryo minelets are kind of like the dry ice bubbles you may have seen back in science class.
Bubble solution like this, and let's see if we can fill the bubble. These are eggs.
Look at that.
These are boo eggs, or boo bubbles.
The nitrogen.
Yeah, the carbon dioxide.
The carbon dioxide.
But I digress. So now let's see them in action. In this clip, I'm just going to be shooting at a wall to create cryo minelets. Now, for those of you who are counting, you may have noticed that a full clip of 40 ammo is actually only making about 18 or 19 minelets, despite a supposed 100% minelet chance. Part of that is because every bullet actually uses up 2 ammo with the Zhukovs, but I've done this a few times, and it seems like the actual number of minelets you produce is a bit variable and often not the full 20. Now back to the weapon terminal, let's talk about the loadout. In Tier 1, the options are 100 extra ammo, or 1 extra direct damage. But we're not just using this weapon for direct damage with cryo minelets, and having 1 extra damage is pretty minimal, but having extra ammo means extra minelets, which is pretty helpful. Furthermore, it takes 15 damage to kill a swarmer on Hazard 5, so you're not going to be hitting this breakpoint regardless, and the 1 extra damage won't help you much with other breakpoints either. Then in Tier 2, I choose Quickfire Ejector to reload more quickly for multiple reasons. One of the main reasons is that I pair this with the Get In Get Out weapon mod in Tier 5, which gives you a 50% movement speed bonus for 2.5 seconds when you reload after emptying an entire clip. Obviously, being able to reload more quickly is helpful on its own, but when you're using the Get In Get Out weapon mod, it's actually also kind of nice to have the smaller clip size that cryo minelets gives you, because this means that you can unload the entire clip faster and more frequently, thus activating the Get In Get Out movement speed bonus more often without wasting as much ammo. Although we could take the first mod in this tier for +10 magazine size to increase the clip size back up to equal with the base gun, I find that a 40 ammo clip produces enough minelets to freeze a Praetorian or a line of bugs, so unloading an entire 50 ammo clip would not only take longer but would also be a waste of ammo. Similarly, the Zhukovs already fire very quickly, so an increased rate of fire would also probably waste ammo. Then in Tier 3, again, 1 extra damage just isn't that beneficial, whereas reducing your base spread from 100% to 40% is really useful. So let's take a look at this difference in spread. First, we have 100% base spread at 10 meters. Now we'll see 40% base spread at 10 meters. Then 100% base spread at 20 meters. And finally 40% base spread at 20 meters. So as you can see, there's a big difference in spread with and without the Better Weight Balance mod. Although the Zhukovs are not a precision weapon, with the Better Weight Balance mod, they're still precise enough to freeze faraway enemies like menaces, because cryo minelets affect a 1.5 meter radius. Now in Tier 4 you have a few different options, but really for cryo minelets, blow-through rounds are pretty much mandatory if you want to get the most out of them. And I want to show you why that is as well. Unfortunately, the best way I could think of to show this was by demonstrating on Steve, so please forgive me, Steve, for what I'm about to do. As you can see, without blow-through rounds, all the bullets hit Steve, but none of them pass through to make cryo minelets. With blow-through rounds, on the other hand, every time you shoot a bug, it'll either pass through and hit another bug behind it, or it will hit the ground and create cryo minelets, allowing you to do damage and freeze at the same time. Thanks for the help, Steve.
For rock and stone!
As I mentioned earlier, I take get in, get out in Tier 5, largely because I really try to max out mobility for my scout. To show how helpful get in, get out can be, here's a quick video of me unloading multiple full clips of Zhukov ammo onto a group of enemies surrounding my downed teammate. Using get in, get out, I'm able to quickly and safely keep circling this group of enemies, keep them all frozen, and do damage at the same time. Then I'm able to revive my teammate because the enemies are frozen, and they'll stay frozen because I've laid down a bunch of cryo minelets that'll continue to go off while I'm reviving. If you are using IFG grenades, however, then you really should take conductive bullets. But for me, in my main loadout, I use cryo grenades because I find them to be just so helpful in clutch situations or against flying enemies, or even swarmers if you're overwhelmed. This may seem a little bit redundant with cryo minelets, but personally I don't find the overlap to be a problem. In fact, personally I think that having cryo grenades and cryo minelets can synergize well, because you can throw a grenade at a swarm to stop them in their tracks if they get too close, and then you can use cryo minelets to keep them frozen while you take them all out. For those that do prefer IFGs though, you can create an elemental loadout using cryo minelets and Bullets of Mercy. So for this, I have Bullets of Mercy on my assault rifle, and then I have the stun mod so that it can proc its own buff. And for the Zhukovs, the loadout is pretty similar, except instead of get in, get out, I have the conductive bullets. And now that I'm not getting the movement speed bonus from emptying a clip, I'm not taking quickfire ejector, and instead I'm using the high capacity magazine so that I don't have to reload as often. Now, this probably is the best way to use cryo minelets to their full potential, since you get a 33% damage bonus to affected enemies with Bullets of Mercy. For my playstyle though, I still prefer to have AI Stability Engine on my main loadout. I think with Bullets of Mercy you just have to become too reliant on applying status effects to enemies, which isn't quite as fun to me. AI Stability Engine, on the other hand, helps you deal with faraway enemies and flying enemies, which the Zhukovs and cryo minelets can't handle as well, so I think this creates a more well-rounded loadout overall. AI Stability Engine also gives you a 40% weak point damage bonus, which is great for Mactera, Spitballers, etc., and I like that it's incentivizing me to hit weak points. Now admittedly, this weak point bonus is wasted on enemies frozen by cryo minelets, but you already get a 300% damage bonus against frozen enemies, so you can take them out pretty quickly regardless of any other buffs. Before we leave the weapon terminal, I do briefly also want to touch on the one other unique overclock for the Zhukovs, embedded detonators. These do a ton of damage on reload, 38 per bullet to be exact, but they come with a big penalty to direct damage and ammo. They may in fact still be objectively better than cryo minelets, and I like the concept of embedded detonators, but again, it doesn't really fit with my playstyle. For larger targets it's fine, but I don't find it as fun to shoot a grunt a couple of times before compulsively reloading, because otherwise I might kill them with direct damage and waste the reload damage, not to mention wasting my limited ammo. While we're on the subject of embedded detonators, I also want to demonstrate how blow-through rounds apply to this overclock, because it doesn't work the way I thought it would. In this first clip, I'm not using blow-through rounds, so obviously I'm only embedding detonators in the grunt I'm directly shooting. In the second clip, however, I am using blow-through rounds, and you can see that this actually embeds detonators in both grunts, not just one. I personally still think the extra ammo is more important with embedded detonators, but just keep these mechanics in mind when you're making your loadout. Alright, I think that's everything we can go over here in the space rig, so let's head down to Hoxie's to see cryo minelets in action with some Hazard 5 gameplay. Rather than saving the best for last, I want to show you just how amazing cryo minelets are for taking out menaces right away. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that this is one of the very best ways to kill a menace in the entire game. This is also one of the biggest benefits of having the better weight balance mod, because with reduced base spread on your Zhukovs combined with the 1.5 meter radius of the minelet detonations, and the relatively wide hitbox that menaces have, it's pretty easy to lay down some minelets beneath the menace, even if it's on the other side of the cave. They freeze at -50, and as a reminder, each minelet does 10 cold, which means only 5 minelets need to detonate on one to freeze it. I find that unloading half a clip is usually sufficient for this. Then, once they're frozen, they'll stay in place so you and your teammates can easily take them out. That is, of course, unless they were already about to hide, in which case sometimes they'll still disappear despite being frozen. Wardens are a little bit trickier because they walk around, but even if you can't get all your mindlets to land at their feet, you probably still won't be wasting ammo because there's often a group of bugs around them to hit anyway. And although they do have a spherical spore-emitting organ weak point that you can hit, this bobbles around when you hit it, and there's a benefit to cryo-mindlets against wardens beyond just helping you kill them. When wardens get frozen, they stop being able to buff the bugs around them. So when I run into a warden buffing a bunch of bugs, I fire my Zhukovs into the group at the warden until I can freeze it, then take it out, and then I focus on the rest of the bugs. Speaking of how the frozen status effect cancels out certain enemy actions, killing a frozen bug also cancels out the actions they take when they die. This is especially great for brood nexuses because it prevents them from releasing Glyphid spawn. I usually start by shooting 2 of the eyes for weak point damage, then I grapple on top and shoot through the nexus to create mindlets beneath it, which freeze it, and then I finish it off. As an added bonus, there's also this cool little glitch where you don't actually fall to the ground for the first few seconds after you kill a nexus this way. The frozen status effect is also great on swarmers themselves, because ever since Update 32, they always die after being frozen. This is great because the Zhukovs don't meet the breakpoint to kill swarmers in one hit on Hazard 5, unless you're using the gas recycling overclock, which personally I never use because I see the 50% movement speed decrease as being antithetical to the scout. I usually pick off individual swarmers with my assault rifle, but for groups of swarmers, sometimes you can even just paint a line in front of yourself and let the swarmers walk over it and get frozen. You can use a similar technique to lay down mindlets on a swarmer wall before the swarmers come out so they get frozen as soon as they do. Praetorians are another fun enemy to use cryo-mindlets against. They freeze at -150, which was difficult to pull off prior to Update 34, but now with the increased mindlet chance, it's actually pretty easy to freeze them this way, using just 1 full clip of ammo. You could just fire at their feet if they're standing still, but a more fun and ammo-efficient technique is to grapple above them, land on their back so you can keep bouncing on top of them, power attack downwards to take off some armor, and then unload a clip of the Zhukovs downward through them to create mindlets below them. Afterwards, you finish them off once they freeze. You don't have to do all of these steps, and the power attack in particular is optional, but without it you'll be shooting at armor with the Zhukovs and not really doing damage until they're frozen. And obviously, just shooting their weak point is a good technique as well, whether you're creating mindlets or not. Now the simplest way to use cryo-mindlets against Praetorian is to just wait until they stand still to spray acid, then circle around to their back, hop, and fire downward through their weak point, and then you finish them off when they freeze. As you can see in this next clip though, the benefit of bouncing on top of Praetorians or other large enemies is that during a swarm, this keeps you out of the range of Grunt's melee attacks, which allows you to safely freeze the Praetorians and then hop off and finish them while they're still frozen. Oppressors, on the other hand, are not a good use for cryo-mindlets. They freeze at -300, unfreeze at -200, and warm by 100 per second, so they're really hard to freeze and they unfreeze very quickly. It even takes 2 cryo grenades to freeze an oppressor since each grenade is 250 cold. With oppressors, you're just better off shooting at their weak point or having a cryo driller freeze them. As a side tip though, if a group of enemies are clumped around a downed teammate or something like that, and there's an oppressor there, use cryo-mindlets on the other enemies and save the oppressor for last, because the oppressor will actually damage the other enemies for you. Although you can use cryo-mindlets against spitballers, and freezing them does prevent them from shooting, I still wouldn't generally recommend it. It's just too hard to get the angle right so that your mindlets will land at their base and freeze them, so sometimes you won't be able to freeze them at all, and you'll just be wasting ammo and time. As you can see from this next clip, cryo-mindlets are actually significantly less ammo efficient against spitballers than just shooting at their weak points. It took me 1 clip of assault rifle ammo to kill the spitballer by shooting at its weak point, but with cryo-mindlets you have to use at least 5 mindlets to freeze them, and then it still takes almost a full clip of assault rifle ammo.
Nelson. Nelson here. Nelson, come here. Here, here, here. Nelson, come here.
Now that we've gone through some of the uses of cryo-mindlets against specific enemies, we should really talk about the main use for cryo-mindlets, which is for crowd control against swarms. Kiting bugs is central to this strategy. Again, I'm no pro gamer, but my understanding of kiting is that you let the bugs chase you in a way that groups all of the enemies together on one side of you, which keeps you from becoming surrounded and allows you to safely shoot at them from a distance. Personally, I've seen no better demonstration of this than by Nelson, the world's worst sheepdog. So, be Nelson, my friends. The simplest way to do this is to simply run away. This helps draw enemies away from the rest of your team, and it can make it safer for you to circle back and revive teammates later on. As you're running though, if you go through any narrow holes like compact dirt, you should use these as choke points to funnel the bugs. With cryo-mylets and blow-through rounds, you'll be able to do damage to bugs as they pass through the hole, while also keeping bugs frozen so that you can hold your ground for longer and take out a larger proportion of the swarm this way. Having cryo-mylets does change the general strategy behind kiting a bit though, because you'll want to kite in a way that results in as many bugs being frozen by as few cryo-mylets as possible. I don't want to bore anyone to death, but I think the best way to explain this is actually with some diagrams. But don't worry, we'll get back to squashing bugs soon, I promise. Okay, bear with me, because admittedly, these diagrams are going to be pretty rough, but here it goes. Imagine this is a cave inside of Hoxie's. You're a scout, and there are some glyphids coming for you. Now, if you fire straight ahead at the glyphid in the front of the pack, your bullet will hit that glyphid and the one behind it. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you want to create cryo-mylets, then you'll need to aim at more of a downward angle to hit the front glyphid and then hit the ground. Depending on where the rest of the pack is in relation to this front glyphid, once they all move forward, you might be able to freeze the glyphids in the back of the pack once your mylets detonate after the delay. But if the glyphids in the back aren't that far behind the glyphids in the front to begin with, then they might already all be past your mylets by the time they go off. One way to avoid this problem is to hop and then fire when you're mid-air, so that you can fire at an even steeper downward angle. This way, the mylets land even closer to you, so that you're more likely to freeze the bugs with them as they walk forward. So when you're kiting, you should really pay attention to where your mylets are and focus on kiting the bugs over your mylets to freeze as many bugs as possible. You can do this while running away, but if you keep running in the same direction, then there will always be unfrozen bugs in between you and the frozen bugs, which of course makes it harder for you to shoot the bugs while they're frozen and take advantage of the damage bonus. So instead, what you can do is either circle around the bugs while unloading clips of Zhukov ammo into the center of the circle, which allows you to use the speed bonus from the Get In Get Out weapon mod which I showed earlier, or you can actually kite the bugs back and forth by grappling over them to get behind them. The best way to do this is to fire your Zhukovs at the front of the pack, which will lay down several mylets, some of which will go off sooner than others. Then, jump up so that you're above the glyphids' heads so they can't hit you as you pass over them. And then, grapple directly behind them following a line that goes through yourself, the glyphids, and the cryo-mylets you just laid down. For bonus points, turn around while you're still using your grappling hook so that you're already facing the bugs and ready to fire by the time you hit the ground. Now the frozen glyphids will be right in front of you so you can shoot at them, and any unfrozen glyphids will turn around and walk back over your mylets. At this point, you can either take out your primary weapon and shoot the frozen glyphids with that, or you can use your Zhukovs with blow-through rounds to shoot through multiple frozen grunts at once, or you can keep shooting with the Zhukovs at an angle to do damage to one grunt and make a new mylets at the same time, so that you can grapple across to the other side again and repeat the process, freezing more and more glyphids as you go. Now here's a brief slow-mo clip to demonstrate this back and forth strategy. You can see I start off by firing at the glyphids in the front of the pack at a downward angle. I continue to hold my ground, baiting more glyphids over the mylets I just made, up until the pack gets too close. Then I hop, grapple over their heads, turn around mid-air, and start firing at the frozen glyphids at the back of the pack. But okay, that's enough time in the classroom. Let's get out there and really take cryo-mylets for a spin by putting all of these techniques together and seeing how they hold up against a big swarm. For this, I'm in a solo 4-egg mission on Hazard 5 with no Bosco, and I'm going to pop all 4 eggs in a row and then fight the swarm back in the spawn room. I'll highlight some of the techniques with text on the screen as we go, and I'll fast forward through the less informative parts to save time.
Time to earn your paycheck, team. Got a doozy of a swarm underway. Combat positions. The swarm is here.
Alright, so there you have it. That's how I use cryomylants to handle swarms. Wrapping things up here, I would say that cryomylants are versatile enough for all mission types, though they do have drawbacks on critical weakness missions because weak points don't count when enemies are frozen, Mactera Plague missions because they don't help with flying enemies, and in Glacial Strata where some enemies have cold resistance. Most of the clips I've shown in this video were of solo footage for the sake of demonstration, but cryomylants are also great when you're part of a team too. As I alluded to earlier, cryomylants are very helpful for reviving downed teammates. It's really easy to freeze the bugs clustered around a downed dwarf, because those bugs will stand still, so you can efficiently freeze and take them out from a distance before zipping in to revive your teammate. Cryomylants also generally synergize well with the rest of your team, since everyone benefits from having the bugs frozen. Everyone will get the triple damage bonus, but keep in mind that this only counts for direct damage and not AoE, so certain weapons benefit more from this than others. When playing with engineers and gunners who have more firepower than you, sometimes you can just focus on freezing bugs and let them focus on doing damage, either to the frozen bugs or to the bugs you weren't able to freeze. If you're playing with a driller who's using the flamethrower or a gunner who's using incendiary grenades, etc., they might unfreeze bugs that you've frozen, but on the plus side, this results in a temperature shock status effect, which does a whopping 200 damage and kills most low-level enemies outright. If you're playing with a driller who's using the cryo cannon, on the other hand, then you do sort of get diminishing returns. And speaking of cryo drillers...
Yeah, the cryo cannon really is the best. That's what you were talking about, right?
Oh, I was just wrapping up the cryomylants tutorial by talking about how using cryomylants fits in with the rest of your team.
Yeah, it is cool that scouts and drillers are the only classes that can use the frozen status effect. And Bosco, I guess.
Plus, the frozen status effect honestly seems like the most powerful status effect in the entire game.
And the driller has the most powerful freezing weapon in the game.
Yeah, sure, the cryo cannon is really powerful, but I like that the scout has more long-range freezing options with cryo grenades and cryomylants, so I still prefer the scout's weapons overall.
Yeah, but the cryo cannon has the reach mod and the snowball overclock if range is really that important to you. In any case, I still think that the cryo cannon is the most powerful freezing weapon in the game.
Well then, I guess we're at a bit of an impasse, aren't we?
It seems we are. So how are we going to settle this?
I think I have an idea.
To the empires of old. That's the stuff.
Aha!
Rock and stone, everyone!
Ha ha.
Damn it.